Peace and wholeness. Welcome back to the Her Holistic Path podcast. I finally got it uploaded to YouTube. If you are a doula, a birth worker, or you do any type of healing work and you're looking to infuse more spiritual awareness into your practice, I think you're really going to like this episode. I got a chance to interview T. Luna Hotep. She is many things, some of which would be a birth educator, a herbalist, and she even trains doulas in Ghana. This conversation was literally a journey, and it just felt like medicine and inspiration to me on my own path, and I hope it feels the same to you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm well. Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I am in the midst. Today's the first day of spring break for my children, and I'm like realizing that it's not a break. It's a break for them, but it's not a break for me.
It's spring on for you.
Game on. And so now I'm just like, okay, let me reorient my brain, because I was ready to like chill out and vibe, which we still will do that. But yeah, I got to put my mama hat on tight this week. So I just kind of, to give a little background, last month was Black Midwives Day. And on Black Midwives Day, I tuned into a webinar that you were one of many birth workers who were speaking. And I was just so captivated and inspired by your presentation. I felt like you did amazing. And I was like, this message has to keep reverberating throughout the atmosphere. So here we are. Thank you so much for joining. So let's just start with, how did you get into this path, into your journey?
Such a good question. Yeah, I realize now that the path is, I was born into this path. When you really dive deep and start being more reflective about how you got where you are in life, that's where I've gotten to. So I didn't really grow up around like Black birth work or anything like that. And I really love hearing people say, I'm like a third generation midwife. And I love to hear that. That's not my story. However, I always grew up around mamas and babies. My mother was a teen mother, and she and her friends raised their kids together. So I feel like that is a part of this work and why I'm so passionate and how it has like derived and it developed and evolved, right? And so I got intentionally into holistic medicine, herbalism, and all of that almost 10 years ago. So not quite 10 years ago, in 2015. And so that led me down the path similar to most black girls, tapping in their magic, Queen of Fua, and all of that, opening those doors for us. And so then it led me to a path of figuring out what that meant for me. What did healing my womb mean for me? It was always a personal journey. And I believe, or it was personal at first. I knew I wanted to work in my community. I knew I wanted to assist my community with healing, wellness, well-being. And so my background is actually in religious studies and theology. And I didn't know I didn't know where I was doing. Like, all I knew was that after years and years of being in school, being, academia, I was really big into that. That I really just wanted to be of service. I really wanted to do the work, and be careful what you what you tell the divine, because that will just open up. And so that has led me to where I am now and in the work that I do now.
That's beautiful. And it's so funny how, like, I feel like we go to school and, we're going based off of like a somewhat, whimsical idea of like what we want to do, because we're so young and we're just like, I can see myself, blah, 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 blah. And then you get to the end of being in school and you're like, I don't really know. still, I feel like they need to integrate some sort of like, I don't know, some sort of classes to help you really tap into like who you are and like your path and all of that. But also institutional school is kind of
Right.
a joke. So tell us about what your experiences have been traveling and how that has been with your birth work and your healing work.
Mhm. So my first journey traveling was to Brazil in 2016 and into 2017. I lived in Brazil for 3 months. And I really start with that because it opened my mind to what leaving our comfort zone, how that expands our awareness, And so when I lived in Brazil, I realized that people, for the most part, even though, Brazilians are living just like us, they just like us, right? But for a large part, they are very well connected to the earth. They spend a lot of time outside. They go to the beach a lot. They, integrate a lot of spirituality in their everyday life. And so I feel like those little nuggets that I got in my time living in Brazil made me want more of that. I started to see that the hustle and bustle that we're used to, go, get it, spend time indoors all the time. You're in an office, you're doing this. And of course, this is pre-COVID, before everybody started realizing that that's a thing, right? And I just realized, like, no, people really be like at the beach chilling with their family. People really just be, they integrate Orisha in their everyday life and don't even realize it. There's music, there's laughter, there's joy. And I actually realized, like, oh my gosh, we're just not necessarily used to that. We're not used to, on a Friday night, your dad sitting around playing guitar and everybody coming over and singing and dancing and stuff, that way of community and family. And so I would say that opened my eyes to know that there was another way of living. So I say that to start, that traveling is about that. Like, traveling is more than just let me go to a place for 2 weeks and ball out because the currency is cheaper there. Like, that's the mentality that Black travel has, I feel like, in this social media world that we live in, that traveling while Black is cool because your money go longer and you get to go and do this. It's like, actually traveling is healing, and it can offer us a different perspective, and it can show us that this grind culture that we live in isn't healthy for us, and that people actually spend time with their families. And yeah, and that there are certain things that we value that a lot of people don't see as important, and everybody got to make money, everybody got to take care of their kids, but actually being with your children and raising them and giving them culture and all that is so important. So this next extensive travel, I guess, would be my journey to Ghana. I've lived in Ghana for 1.5 years. So I left the US in September 2021. And I thought I was going to go for a couple months. I was like, oh, I'm just going to go for a couple months to see, how life is. I didn't have a plan. I had just completed my work in my certification in traditional naturopathy through a life of peace. And I was like, okay, but now what's next? Like, like I already had like my business, it was doing okay. And so many other things happened with that. And so travel for me this time was about reconnection, about touching the motherland. And I know we could get on a whole conversation about how people feel about all that, but at the end of the day, what we know, that all people came from Africa. It don't matter if you think, my people indigenous. Yes, I have indigenous people to America too, but I also know and recognize deeply that my people did come from Africa. And so when you touch the soil, there is this like moment of that acknowledgement, that on a cellular level.
And it's, that makes me think of, I talked to a birth worker friend of mine, and she moved out of the US. And I said to her, what do you think about people who say, these Americans are moving out of the US and they're coming to places and they are, essentially there's this feeling of like, y'all don't belong here, and I asked her, how do you contend with that? How do you contend with moving to a place and feeling like that's your new home without disrupting that culture? And she was like, what do you mean? The whole earth is my home. You know what I'm saying? The entire globe, this entire world is our home. And when she said that, it was like these layers of conditioning like melted off of my brain. And I was like, oh yes, colonization makes us feel like, and I mean, there's that thing with tribalism too, right? So the combination of that makes us feel like there's these boundaries of which we're not supposed to come out of. But it's like, oh, no. This whole earth is everybody's home. And we only really feel like protective when we're not treating the earth well, and that even just the idea of how traveling can be healing, it's like, what does it do for our epigenetic expression to say the last, I don't want to say the last person in our family line, but
no, but that is what it is.
What does it do for us, for our genetics to experience like, okay, someone brought me here and now I have the agency to leave.
I mean, on a true, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. On a true epigenetic healing point, that you feel it on a cellular level.
Yeah.
How returning home and stepping foot and putting your feet in the soil of the motherland, it don't matter where you step foot, but that you're returning back, your womb feels it, every part, everything inside you feel it. And so, I was very weary about going to the dungeons, and I did go once. And I mean, and that was the feeling in the dungeons, which was like, who you feel it on an epigenetic memory, like a part of in you remembers how scary that unknown feeling felt, and so when we as diaspora and descendants of enslaved Africans, right, that we have it on that level in a way that Africans who are on the land don't, because they go and they're like, oh yeah, this happened, Jesus, sad, it's history for them. It's like, oh, okay, it's detached. And when we go, we are the remnant that was left behind. And I said, when I realized it's a miracle that we still Black, of all that our families went through. It is nothing but divine ordinance that we still have a resemblance of the ancestors who went through that process, because it was meant to break us. It was meant to make to erase us. And if and when we return, I really do feel like it's necessary, which is why I wrote did my presentation on that. Like, we are meant to return home. And there are elders who heard from the divine that we are meant to return home, and they're waiting for us. They're waiting to die. They're waiting for us to return so that they can go on, and so that we can get the medicine that we're supposed to get.
Wow, that's powerful. Do you feel like, or not feel like, did your journey with Orisha in African traditional religion, did that start with your journey to Ghana, or was that before and it just a continuation?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, it didn't at all. And Ghana has very little acknowledgement or awareness of Orishas, because Orishas are Nigerian anyway, and so they're Yoruba specifically, and so, but I can get on that, but we'll come back around. So no, I started my journey into African spirituality in 2015. So I started it as I was doing my own healing work, and I moved out of a traditional Judeo-Christian centered lens, and I moved into wanting to tap into my ancestral spiritual practices. And so it actually opened up through Kemet, of course, as we all, through Kemetic sciences, through Ifa as a science, so if you understand and understand more than religion or spirituality, but there's a science to that as well. And then also through Malik Domasome and Sobonfu Some, who I quoted and mentioned in my work, through their practice in traditional spiritual sciences and understanding ritual. So all of that actually happened way before I came to Ghana. And Ghana was me trying to like see it in real time and see if I could pinpoint it, and some of the things that really hit me was like when I first got to Ghana, I'll be quick on this one. And some of the spiritual things that I experienced, I remember being like, oh shit, I read that in a book. Like, like to see some stuff that is beyond going to somebody's church, like seeing shit float and stuff that shouldn't, and seeing people use their keys and medicine and magic to do things right in front of your eyes. And you're like, you rubbing your eyes like, is that real? Because we're so conditioned to think that that's only on TV. We're conditioned to think that that's only in movies, that somebody has to use CGI and all this stuff that to make something that is real. It came from something, and so I think that was the biggest thing for me when I did get to Ghana, was being exposed to a lot of spiritual things and having to like decompress my consciousness to like take some of that, oh, this can't be real, out, and say, no, this is right in front of your face. Like you cannot, can't
deny it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So how did that impact your journey with birth work?
So much. So the intricate and unfortunate thing is that there, because of this neo-colonized lens through which Africa is being exposed to now, right? When with China and all these other countries about coming back, people are moving more towards Western medicine. And so what I expected was what True Kellum wrote in her book, going back to Africa and going into the village and going to, but what I got, was definitely like traditional midwives saying, oh yeah, we can't practice anymore. Like I don't catch babies anymore because they've told me that it's illegal. So if there's a hospital close enough, then the mom has to go there, and so them keeping it on the hush, keep not talking about it. And so it actually took a lot more time. I work in the clinics there. So I trained doulas through the holistic doula, through A Life of Peace. I trained holistic doulas in Ghana, most of whom are diasporans who are learning, not so much local people, but we go to the local clinics, and then the local midwives look at us and they're like, what are y'all doing? So we had to really teach them like, oh no, we're not here to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. We're just here to remind you that this is how you love on a mom. That you don't just beat her and treat her like she isn't giving birth to a person. Like, they're the way that they're treated in the hospitals is quite disgusting, and it has everything to do with colonization, and so just reminding them that once upon a time, not too long ago, a mom did get rubbed on and loved on while she was in this process, and we're just reminding you that. So that has kind of been the journey. What I have gotten, and the impact of spiritual science and herbalism, like those things aren't gone. That's the beauty of that, is that people are catching less babies at home. They are going to the hospital, even people in the villages. However, people still have the medicine, and so those are things that I'm learning slowly but surely, having to ask a lot of questions because it's not just blatant in your face. most people do know something about herbs, something, something, little something, something, but you have to ask a lot of questions. They don't just tell folks, so that's been it. It has been a very much observing, sitting back, watching, asking, what are
Mhm.
you using that for? Going on a lot of walks, picking up the herb, seeing what they're doing that, and then somebody remember, oh yeah, you can use this for that, and so just picking that up over time.
Yeah, it's so interesting how, for us here in the States to go back through the history of birth, we have to rewind, like a couple hundred years to explain why we're here now, right? We have to go back into early 1900s, early 1800s, 1700s to explain, well, this is when obstetrics and gynecology got started, and this is how, and this is why, and this is all of the racism and the colonization that's weaved into it. But over there, it's like that's what's happening now.
Yes, very
And
much so.
it's so interesting. What I want to ask you is, I've spoken to people who are from places that have like one hospital, and the hospital is super far away, and it's like there's this kind of a catch-22 where there's some places on the globe where, because of the health issues that are occurring, right? Because of lack of clean water or lack of good sanitation or whatever the case may be, there's certain diseases or certain issues that are impacting the health of mothers. And so for them, having a hospital
It's
is
like,
is
yeah.
life-saving. It's incredibly important. They haven't reached that point that the US has reached, where it's like we have too many hospitals in some places, or we have too much, I won't say too many hospitals, but too much medicalization of pregnancy and birth. Where do you feel like, how was your experience with viewing like this place? You, of course, you need a hospital, but at the same time, there seems to be a loss of like that ancestral birthing practice. What was that like for you?
I mean, so I'm from the South. So to be honest, we kind of deal with the same thing in rural places in the South, where my family's from, in Atmore, Alabama. The hospital that is there, you can't birth there. So this town has no hospital that people can give birth at. So they have to go outside in Alabama. So if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it like that, for me, it felt similar because of that, being raised in the South, and how in those rural areas they are greatly impacted, and a lot of it has to do same. So it's the same for me, parallel. When you take out the healer of your community but leave the people with nothing, you're doing them a disservice. The
Mm-hmm.
only reason that people's lives are at risk is because the healer that was in their community isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
You told this healer that her work is illegal, that they can't do this here, that they could go to jail. You've killed them. You've done this. You've done that. You ostracized them. You called them witches and da 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 da. Right? That is, it is a full reflection of
Mm-hmm.
of the systems taking the healers out of the communities. So we see it here and we see it there, because at the end of the day, these healers, and they call them traditional birth attendants or whatever the case may be, they knew what they were doing. They knew how to keep things sanitized. They knew all of these practices, but they couldn't pass it on. Why? Because people moved out. So it wasn't enough people to pass this wisdom on.
Right.
People were left without so much access to knowledge and information. And so it leaves the most vulnerable at risk anywhere you go, whether that's here in America, whether that's out in the middle of the bush. Anywhere you go, when you take the knowledge and wisdom of the people out, you leave them vulnerable. Ignorance is vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so crazy to me to think that even, in a place where we want to return to, we want to return home, it's like they're going through that process of their healers being removed. Which brings me to, I guess, a controversial question, but I feel like I have to bring this up. Not to everyone that I interview, but to the people I feel like they have a good voice in this conversation about, traditional midwifery in the States. And how do you feel about the role of traditional midwives? I know that during different weeks that we have where we celebrate or bring awareness to the issues within the Black community, or we celebrate the strides that we've made, sometimes there's this air of like, midwifery is good as long as you're a licensed midwife. Midwifery is making changes as long as you're a CNM or a CPM. And the conversation gets really quiet and really gray and a lot of side eyes when we start talking about traditional midwifery. But yet in the same breath, we'll be like, healers, healers, healers. And look what they did to our grandmothers. And I'm like, is it me? Or am I missing something? Because
it's not you.
What do you think about that? As far as you'd like to speak on that topic.
I know. Okay, so I actually dealt with that myself, right? That internal.
Putting you on the hot spot.
Yeah, you really like for real. Like I had a real internal struggle about that. The same thing, like because who legitimizes us? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like the traditional when traditional healers, when traditional midwives said they never lost a baby, no matter what the race of that baby was, they never lost a baby. They was dealing with preterm babies. They was dealing with low weight babies. They was dealing with the same problems. Mm-hmm. You think malnutrition and all these things is new? No. So it's like they knew something more. And so for me, when I see midwives like Mama Saran and Mama Sakisa and midwife Miri Saiz, like I love my midwife Tony. Like I love my midwives that keep it 100 with you, like, and I know that midwife Tony from Mississippi, she just mentioned how she went ahead and took the test for CPM, and that, she'd been a midwife for over 10 years, but she was like, let me go ahead and take this test, because if I don't do it, then there's no Black preceptors in my area for Black midwives who want to take the CPM. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's the thing we're running into, is that you see more Black midwives taking the CPM because just to make sure that there's somebody who's coming behind them. Yeah. And the legislation and all that you hear when you listen to the midwives who, whether they are CNMs or CPMs, how much they had to go through in order to get where they are, like how much rigmarole, how, all that red tape that they put them through, the years and years it took them to get certified, to finish nursing school, to all these different things, right? That's controlled by white women. It's not even white men no more. We ain't got to worry about them. The white women got their foot on our neck hard enough, Yeah. And so for me, I even ran into that when I first, when I moved to Alabama, because my family's from Alabama. So I grew up in Atlanta, moved to Alabama. But when I moved there in 2018, I reached out to there was no Black midwives at the time. Now Stephanie Mitchell has moved down to Alabama, but she wasn't there before. So, there was a few white midwives in my area, and I reached out about assisting the Black families that they're serving. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, thank you. She said, the only people I allow to assist me are my midwives assistants and the doulas that I work with. But if there's anyone that's looking for some services like yours, I'll let you know. I'll send them your way.
And that's where the rubber meets the road for me, because while I remember seeing this quote of somebody saying, don't forget that our ancestors, and our grandparents and great-great-grandparents, they did want things separate but equal.
For real.
Don't forget that a lot of Black people
we didn't care about
separate, equal, but nah, y'all can stay over there.
That's right.
Because when we start this whole idea of integrating, it's a facade. It's not actually integration. It's just another layer of oppression that we have assimilated to, that we all are comfortable.
Integration is assimilation, but another word. So if you didn't, if integration, we all know it's not hidden that integration was the worst thing that could have happened for Black people. It was the worst thing that could have happened for our communities, for our health and well-being. We just wanted equal support and care from the government. We wanted the books up to date. We wanted our medical facilities up to date. We wanted that. When I think about integration, my grandmother is 67, and she's the baby. All of her siblings, she and her siblings were born at home. I was just talking to my mom, and she was saying that my grandmother was reflecting that the first people who were born in the hospitals there, they had to go under, like, in the basement. The Black people were allowed to birth in the basement. And they said in the indigenous folk, because my family is Muskogee Creek Native American as well, and so that the indigenous folk had to go below that. So they said that, like, they was integrating, but they was not treating us equally. We were not getting seen by anyone who cared about us.
Yeah.
So yes, that is true. So yeah, that's the truth. You're right. And so when it comes to that, I really will say, when go back to your question, this whole legitimization and all of that, I do have a problem with it, because it makes you feel like, what are my choices? And so for me, I was going to do the the route and take the CPM route and all this stuff. And then I got more information around the CIM, the Certified International Midwifery route, which means I could catch babies internationally, because technically me taking births abroad, I wouldn't be able to qualify for the CPM still. So I would have to come here to the US to catch babies and stuff like that. So I was going back and forth. And again, my ancestors was like, we told you what you were supposed to do. Like, they was just like, they're like, we told you what you were supposed to do. And I feel like my issue with the CPM and the CNM is that it limits you. It actually doesn't open more doors for you. It limits you as a practitioner. And because you then have to care about your license getting revoked instead of caring for people. And I'm here for the people,
right,
first, and so I know that I'm called to work with people and my goal is to, and Midwife Tony said this on a Clubhouse before, and she was saying how she was like, we need to know how to take difficult births. We need to know how to take high risk births, because as long as it's not necessary for a cesarean, if we don't have experience of what people consider high risk and how we can heal them, how we can work through medicine and homeopathy and herbalism to support moms who have high blood pressure and gestational diabetes, all these things that are curable. These things don't automatically mean that the mom has to go to the hospital, but they're because of the CPM and because of the CNM, they're automatically thrown into the hospital, which puts them more at risk then, And so for me, my journey, moving into my journey as a student midwife, because I'm taking that step now, it is about being able to serve all birthing folk who come my way. If they don't need to be cut open, I want to be able to serve them.
Yes. Yes. And I thought about this so much when we were like at the height of the pandemic, and you had all these people who were like switching over to home birth. And I said to myself, right now we're in a pandemic, but let's just say we're in a situation where it's a natural disaster.
Yeah.
In power shortages, we got issues with the mail. And it made me think to myself, all of the people who work within a hospital are trained to use tools.
That's right.
Tools have to be powered by electricity and various other things. They come from a system. So literally the flick of a switch and they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then you have these people here who it's like the midwives, they should be learning about the herbs. They should be learning about the different techniques. They should be learning about the spirituality of it. Mm-hmm. But because the midwifery has been so medicalized, they too would be impaired by a situation like that. And it's so interesting to me how even within these conversations of like, we need more Black midwives and we need that more, we're still, it feels like it's still not all the way clicking over that if we're still being controlled by the state, by the government, by ACOG and all these different organizations, then we're still not getting back to the root of our ability to heal and fully walk with women. And it's crazy when you start looking at the kinds of things that midwives knew how to do before colonization.
Right.
It's like they knew how to do a C-section.
They did know how to do a C-section. They knew how to make sure a baby got here healthily and the mama was going to live just fine. You know, and I was reading an article that said the earliest, or it was probably a YouTube short, a short, you know, social media, mm-hmm. You know, and what they were saying, like Uganda, they were practicing cesarean sections, and I'm sure in Kemet they were practicing cesareans because they were already doing surgery. So let's not act like these things are new. We just knew how to do it in a way that honored the mother and the baby, and both their lives were fine, and how to assist them in making sure that their blood is well, that they're healing effectively, that they still have a holistic postpartum experience, that we're not adding more trauma to their experience. And that is the thing that will save lives, is trying to do the least amount of harm and add the least amount of trauma, and making sure that we integrate holistic practices, especially in the postpartum period, because we're having a lot of conversation now around treating mothers well during pregnancy, treating birthing people well during pregnancy, but there's still a missing convo around the postpartum practices, and that's the part that's killing people, you know. Right. And that's the part that I'm like, when I observe the most is the harm done with the removal of the placenta, and the, you know, and not honoring that, and not all the things that we know are a problem, you know, and just even the treatment of the baby immediately postpartum, not honoring this being who just came from spirit into human flesh, you know. Like there's so much spiritual connection that is being cut at the inception of bringing the earth side, the things that have been cut for all of us, you know. And we wonder why we are living in such a highly traumatizing world right now. And a lot of it has to do with this spiritual imbalance that people are having, and folks are focused on the wrong thing. They think that it is folks' sexuality and gender orientation and this and that and da 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 da. They think it's the wrong thing, you know. And it's like, actually, it's the total disconnection from spirit at the moment that a child is born into the world.
Yeah. And I was doing a plant medicine journey, and I thought to myself, how crazy is it to be born? How crazy is it to come out and emerge, and the first thing that you feel, you know, you're out of the water, you're out of the warmth of your mother, and the first thing you experience is this this rough piece of fabric rubbing at your skin, and people yelling in this bright light, and all of this stress and anxiety. And it must be a very wild experience that in some way disassociates us to some degree from our bodies. And so, you know, let's talk about, those postpartum practices, because I definitely feel like when it comes to birth work, we don't really have any traditions, or we have very limited traditions that are there for our health and our well-being. So what kind of things do you think can be integrated into, I guess you could say, like the Black American postpartum experience that could be helpful, that, you've learned on your journey?
I feel like a lot of people are doing a lot of those things. Whether, and I don't want to just specify in Africa, but I've continued to read a lot about many indigenous places and their practices. So I definitely see the reclamation of home birth as one of those things that people are tapping back into that. I do also see the process of lotus birth as one of those things, and I don't think that goes for everybody. I don't think everybody's meant to have a lotus birth, but I think the acknowledgement that there needs to be a gentler practice when the baby is born, and when and in its process of getting centered on the earth, right? And how we need to honor the placenta as this carrier, that as the second mother, right? That is conceived the moment that baby, that fetus is conceived, the placenta too is conceived, so it's a part of it, and not automatically disconnecting the baby from the placenta. I really truly believe that is something that, as people are doing, I really want more and more people to tap into that wisdom. Because in the traditional settings all around the world, they honored that. They totally got that connection. And midwives, grand midwives, traditional midwives did the same thing. And midwives are now doing that too, so just those practices.
And what do you feel like the benefit of that is? Because so many of us focus on, okay, well, then the baby's going to get all of its blood. Like the baby's going to get this 1/3 of its blood coming from the placenta. But even outside of the physicality, like to you, when you feel like a baby benefits from being intact with its placenta, what does that mean for that baby?
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe what people are saying, like, that it gives them a gentler journey of coming earthside. Also, it gives them their time to adjust to being detached from something that was a part of them. And I really wonder, because we don't know, right? We don't know the feeling, the pain. There are nerves and arteries in the placenta, in the umbilical cord. We don't know how much pain that actually causes the baby when you cut the cord, right? We think it doesn't. We don't think it matters. We think the baby cries for all these other reasons. We don't know how that feels energetically or spiritually. I do believe, about the aura, that they share this aura, and that it should be a gentler experience in them detaching when they're ready. It's like letting go of anything. We have problems letting go of things, and we just think that, we just think this baby's supposed to be like, oh, you're fine, and we wonder why babies are so fussy and disconnected and all of that. And people who have home births, who have lotus births, they say that babies who experience that tend to be calmer, and their spirits, long term, actually seem more adjusted and more grounded. And so those things have been seen on this energetic level of the importance of honoring that placenta baby connection. And so I think we are too quick to discount the feelings of a newborn baby. We're too quick to think that the things that we do to the newborn infant don't matter. And I believe that everything that we do, from the energy that touches the baby the moment that it's born, to the intentions around it, everything, all of that matters. The words being said around the baby coming into the world. I really do believe that all of that has an imprint on it at the most impressionable moment of it coming, because my belief is that a baby the body is just a vessel, and so that's why in traditional settings it takes time for them. They don't bring the baby outside. They don't, depending on however many days, usually up to 10 days, the baby isn't brought outside because it takes time for the spirit of the baby to find the body. We see this in Kemetic theology. We see this in all types of theologies. All indigenous theologies have this perspective, and we wonder. We think that, oh, this personality is just automatic, but it actually takes time. The spirit of that body has to find it. And
Mm-hmm.
so honoring that time, not putting a baby in a room with a bunch of other babies, like who knows, and I have so many other thoughts around why we are dealing with some of the things we're dealing with. And I truly do believe it is due to this, like the spirits not knowing where to go, because they're just not directed in the way that it once was. And so, I do believe that there's so many things when it comes to that placenta connection, to just honoring the gentleness of the process, to not having a lot of hands on the baby. All of those things I do think impact that holistic. And it's because we are spirit. So when people say, oh, spiritual, like spiritual isn't this thing that's outside of us. We are spirit in the body. It took some time for this spirit to get there, and so giving that spirit some time to assimilate and to acclimate into the body.
I totally agree. And it brings up so many things to think about as far as hospital birth, and kind of how people in a hospital birth setting, a lot of times there will be conversation happening once the baby comes out, immediate. And, at first I would ask the parents that I was working with, like, if there's anything you want to happen in that space, if you want it to be quiet, if you want to be the first person to speak to the baby, let me know. But because a lot of times it's like I'm working with people who are American and they don't have any grounding for traditional practices, they're not really conjuring up any ideas. They're just like, I can't really think of anything. But there's been so many times where I was in a hospital room, a baby is born, and the first words, that are spoken after that baby is born is, oh, you were a little difficult one, weren't you? Or you're a little stubborn baby. And I'm like, why would you put that on this new soul, this new spirit that has come in this fresh body? Why would you reverberate those, like those quantum patterns onto this baby? And even just the focus, a lot of times in the hospital room, the focus is put onto everyone but the mother. A lot of times the nurses are having conversations about the baby, or the doctor is saying things, or even I've also witnessed the mother kind of venerating the doctor, like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, you did so great,
you delivered me from this.
You delivered me. And I'm like, what does it do to us? It feels like a ritual for us to be born, in this building with all these strangers, and it's like, that's how most Americans will continue to live their lives. They will move into an apartment building with all these strangers, and they'll go to work in a building with all these strangers, and they'll touch hands and exchange energy with all these strangers. And it just feels like such a symbolic, unfortunate moment of how a lot of people will go on to live the rest of their lives. It makes me think about that a lot. So
I know. That's what like, because it's all connected, and I really have done the same thing, that in those quiet meditations of like how all this is connected and symbolic, and how it's just this, we have been institutionalized, you know, and from the onset, from the moment we come out into the world, and we continue this life until you die. That's what they want us to do in this world, in the Western world, particularly in a world that doesn't value us as human beings.
Yeah.
And you know, and I always say, you know, black mamas and babies were no longer important when there wasn't a value placed on their well-being. You know,
Right.
they didn't have to be living and well and cared for and make sure that the baby make it or the mama make it once they weren't enslaved anymore, you know. So we have to put those pieces back together, and we have to value ourselves enough and stop living in fear, because that's the thing that really separates people from doing what they know that they could do. You know, there are a lot of people who want to have a birth that they know that they deserve. And the thing that I want to push people at where I'm at now is that, for one, doulas, us birth workers, we can't save you. I just want you to know that. Like, you know, and I say that because that really isn't our purpose. We're here to support you in your divine mission as you initiate into parenthood.
Yeah.
We you know, and we can do our best with the tools that we have, but the onus is on the birthing family to educate themselves, to feel confident in the decision that they're making, to read all the books plus some. Like I always say, oh yeah, we read all the books, but you need to, if this is what you want, when you say, I want to have a home birth, I want to do this, and stop doing it out of fear. Because I hear time and time again, you know, folks say, well, I can't, you know, I just don't want to have my baby in the hospital. I'm so afraid. You need to move past that fear. The fear can't be the thing that's pushing you, driving you to have your baby at home.
Right.
You have to know that that's the place that your baby has divinely told you it's meant to be born. Because if not, more often than not, they'll be born in the hospital, because the fear that drove you wasn't strong enough to keep you when the labor, you know, started that work came around, and all that fear continues to drive them until the end, until they say, I'm just going to go succumb to going to the place that I didn't want to be in the first place. So that's kind of the thing that I have seen, is that people really have to let go of the fear and move into their power and make these choices, because they know that they can do it, that they are fully empowered and guided by the mission of the ancestor returning, and that they feel confident in the choice that they make. Because you get shaky when you start telling folks that this is what you want to do, and folks start coming at you sideways. Oh, that's crazy. Nah, I would never do that. Nah, anything can happen. You have to know, because all that's going to go right into you and into your psyche, and bring doubt, and it's going to tap into the fear and doubt you already had. And so if you don't deal with that stuff, there's no way that it can be fully successful as you want it to be, if it's driven and inspired by all those other things. Everything that you have to do has to be done out of love.
Yeah. Ashe. So before we wrap up, if you could share some things possibly that birth workers here in the States you think could begin to integrate into their practice, or even parents that can integrate into their practice when it comes to things like herbs, when it comes to things like even just spiritual practices that can be brought into that journey of pregnancy, birth, postpartum, that you feel like aren't really being integrated, or there's not a lot of awareness around them right now? I know there's infinite herbs and infinite
Oh my gosh. So, oh my goodness. I would say, so I always like to plug a dear sister friend who was a part of my initiation into Black birth work. And I don't even know if she really realizes how much an impact she made on me, but divine birth wisdom. I don't know. Yeah. So you know, I met Divine when she was just starting out her work and what she does now, and to see the impact that she's made and how many folks like take her class, and she's a master at what she does. You know, she's an ethnobotanist, and she really has tapped into the way that herbs work, and she's really talented in what she does. So I like to push like not only birth workers to take her course, because it's not only affordable, but it's extremely accessible, and she knows her stuff. So Divine Birth Wisdom, she's great she does grandma's hands for birth and postpartum traditions, right? Pregnancy and postpartum. And so that's her jam. So I would say getting under master teachers. Like, I feel like that's the number one thing, whether you are a birth worker or a parent, making sure that you have the right guidance and are following the right people. Because if you distract yourself with people who are more caught up around the money or the this or the flash or whatever else, like, you know, 6-figure business in the birth, or like all that stuff, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And that's not really a calling. Like, money comes, it's a flow, it's an energy, right? So you have to make sure your intention is right, and making sure that you're being led by intentional mentors. They don't have to be right in front of your face, but people that you follow. So I will say that's the next one, is mentorship is really important. Woman mentorship, right? And getting someone that truly gets you. You know, I really believe that, because if they don't get you, they can't lead you, they can't teach you, and they can't have the wisdom to guide you when you need it the most. So getting a woman mentor, or mentor who, or however you want to call mentor, Jegna, however you want to call it, you know, folks have funny about those words, right? But getting some guidance by someone who is willing to be there for you when you need them. And they're not gonna tell you what to do. They're gonna honor your process. They're gonna speak words of life into you, and they're also going to listen when you start having the doubt. A good person who's there to guide you is going to reframe that doubt and turn and empower you when you move along this journey. And I would say for your spiritual practice is about tapping into your ancestors. I feel like everybody want to talk about gods and goddesses and stuff, but our first connection is, you know, our first connection to the spirit realm is the people we came from, you know, and it don't have to be nothing big. And I like to tell people that, like, remember that you are the altar. Ritual is a practice of reconnection to earth, to nature. And your ritual could be going outside, taking a walk. Your ritual could be lighting a candle. It could be lighting an incense. It could be taking care of your plants or whatever, right? Drinking some tea and talking to your ancestors. It doesn't have to be bigger than us. And I feel like that's the thing that I'm realizing as I tap into traditional spirituality more so. I realize how simple ritual is and how we make it so big. We make it this whole big shebang. Like, we don't have to be all that. It don't have to be, oh yes, girl, every single day I wake up and I do this whole 25 candle ritual. Like, it don't have to be that. It can be if you got the time, but some of us don't have the time, you know? And so just talking to your ancestors, remembering them, and asking them, what was it that I came here to? What did I sign up for? Because that's the thing we're not always willing to accept. We're not always willing to accept that we signed up for some stuff, right? We signed up to have whatever experience that we need to enlighten our purpose. That's what life gives us. And so when we stop dwelling on the trauma, the pain, the this and that, we can acknowledge it. We don't have to dwell on it. And that's when true healing occurs, is not living in the story that we created in order to survive, and realizing that we can continue to write our story, that we can rewrite our story however many times we need to do so, and don't feel. And that's something, and I say this because of my own experience, and I say this to, don't let the feelings of what you think that other people feel about you, right? Because those are often not real. It's not, the thing that we think other people think are often not real, right? And so that story that we tell, rewrite that story, rewrite one that is empowered and that's full of love, because really, honestly, truly, we can't do nothing without love. And that's how I live. That's my standpoint on it. And that's what I always bring everywhere I go.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much. I felt like this conversation was truly a journey. And I feel like it will be a nice companion for those who are on their journey. So if people would like to tap into your offerings, your services, let us know what you're in the midst of and where people can find you.
Sure. I do admit that I'm not the best on social media, but they can always email me at tluna at aydhealwell.org. That is aydhealwell.org. I do have this, that's also my website that is in revamping right now. I am currently educating holistic doulas in Ghana, and I also work online through a Life of Peace Wellness Institute. So I don't train on my own. I train through the institute. And I also just launched my holistic childbirth educators course. And I will also put out some childbirth education for families. And so that's been fun, because I teach childbirth as for educators. I don't teach it the way that most people teach it, because I'm like, well, that's not why they took my course. I come at it as a very inclusive, fully, social justice, social economic lens, like just understanding how our experiences empower our community, and we need to use that to educate them. So kind of diving deep into that from that perspective. What else am I doing? Yeah, I just be out here so they can follow me on social media, but right now they're not gonna get much. But I really genuinely live, and I think that makes it hard for me to kind of record my life. Yeah, living is a real thing, y'all, and I really want people to live more. And so, yeah, that's where I am right now. One day I might do more, bring people over to learn certain things that'll come in the future. So if you want to come to Ghana to hang out, I'm also open for that. I'll be around. And
Okay, don't say it too loud now.
I want people to come and visit. I'm like, yes, like I really have created a life to where I want to welcome people, because I think that it's important to do that. And I feel like I wanted to share one thing. Oh, I'm also, and I haven't done it yet, but I am going to, as I start my midwifery studies and training, I'm going to maybe do like a little study with me and book review YouTube channel one day, sometime. So that's me holding myself accountable to what I said.
I'm gonna hold you accountable.
That's what that is. Me saying that out loud is that.
Now it's out here in the atmosphere. We know you can't hide.
But that's it. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure, Olivia.
Thanks for watching this episode. I was finally able to get the full episode onto YouTube, so I've hit that milestone. Very excited about that, and there will be many more to come. If there's a particular topic or a person that you want to see on the podcast, then definitely let me know down in the comments. And until then, breathe deep, take a moment